on the first floor of the municipal building. And we provide notice electronically through the township website. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and will be streamed live and available on demand on YouTube. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law and is obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions in order to provide official action. Any questions, comments must be limited to the issues that the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing should be maintained at all times. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call. Now, I'm here.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Ianwali.
Here.
Mr. Graham is excused. Ms. Lockman is excused. Mr. Ortiz.
Here.
Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Counselor Schlager.
Here.
Ms. Willis is not here. Chair Nguyen is here. Mr. Jacobson.
I'm here.
And Mr. Neiman.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, we have minutes from July.
I
20
received amendments to the minutes from Vice Chair Brodock. Are there any other changes? Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
All
Yes,
right.
Mr. Jacobson, you're abstaining because you weren't there.
And that brings us to the public hearing for the municipal complex.
Okay.
Area in need of redevelopment study.
I'm going to move up here. Can you see? Okay. Good evening. I'm not used to standing in this position for the meeting, but it's a pleasure to be here. For the record, we do have representatives from the township here at this hearing to answer questions that you may have after I've gone through my presentation. I do know we also have a representative from the Salvation Army here as well, who's a tenant in the building next door. I think the board and the public are familiar with the redevelopment process. This is the first step in the redevelopment process. Essentially, it's the second step. The first step is the council creating the resolution, asking the planning board to do the study. And as you know from past studies that we've done, this is statutorily driven. And the statute has very distinct steps. Number one, as I said, the council delineates the area for the study and asks the planning board to conduct the study. The planning board, their expert, their planner, me, prepares the study and holds the public hearing. Tonight's hearing has been published as required by statute in the paper, 2 local papers, 2 times, at least the last one at least 10 days before tonight, as well as notice was sent to the property owners, that being the township clerk. Once the planning board listens to the testimony and makes their decision, they make a recommendation to the council. It's the council who actually makes the final determination as to whether or not the properties meet the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment. Once an area in need of redevelopment is designated, then that authorizes the township, or gives the township the ability to prepare a redevelopment plan, as you know, which is adopted by the township council. I want to take a little bit of time because I think it's important to reflect on what the statutory criteria for redevelopment are. Here I just summarized it: dilapidation and unwholesome living or working conditions. What it says, verbatim, is the generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any of such characteristics, or are so lacking in light, air, or space as to be conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. Okay, because I know that one of the properties, this property does meet criteria A, as you'll see later in my presentation. B, vacant commercial buildings that are untenantable. B says the discontinuance of the use of buildings previously used for commercial manufacturing or industrial purposes. That really doesn't apply here because we don't have any buildings that were used for those purposes. C, publicly owned or vacant land for over 10 years that is unlikely to be developed. That doesn't really apply here, so I'm not going to go through the specific language for that criteria. D, I do want to go through exactly what D says. Areas with buildings or improvements which, by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, faulty arrangement or design, lack of ventilation, light and sanitary facilities, excessive land coverage, deleterious land use, or obsolete layout, or any combination of these or other factors are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the community. E, again, is really, and I'll just summarize, E, stagnant or unproductive areas. F is properties that are destroyed by natural disasters, doesn't really apply here. G, New Jersey urban enterprise zone properties, that does not apply here. H, supports smart growth statutes. Again, we are in according to the state plan, we're in planning area 1, the metropolitan planning area. And I'll provide testimony, but that planning area does support redevelopment efforts. And it's technically what the statute says for H, the designation of the delineated area is consistent with smart growth planning principles adopted pursuant to law or regulation. So the study area includes this building, the municipal building. If I had my pointer, I would point there. It's lot 14. It also includes the property next door. It has a residential structure on it that's currently used by Cornerstone House. The tenant is the Salvation Army, and they run a shelter next door. Let me show you. That's lot 12 right here. 14 is the municipal complex, and 15 is the vacant PNC Bank drive-through branch, which is right next door, and that was acquired by the township. The total area is 1.96 acres. We have frontage on 3 streets, which is very good for circulation. Claremont, North Fullerton, and Park Street. And it's characterized by a mix of uses, surrounding uses. There's apartment buildings, there's institutional buildings, there are office buildings and some residential structures. This is a bird's eye view of the study area. I think you can tell we got the municipal building in the middle, the parking lot in the back, the Cornerstone House adjacent to the parking lot. As you can see, the Cornerstone House property includes the trees in the back. Comes back to here. And that part of the reason we want to include it is because it allows for a better design or potential redesign of the relationship between the municipal building and Cornerstone House, which I'll get into later when I discuss that property. And then the PNC Bank, vacant bank branch to the left. The master plan shows that the 2 township-owned properties, or that have been township-owned for at least when the master plan was prepared, are shown in blue. And those are designated as public use properties, which is intended for a variety of public uses. The PNC Bank property is designated as Montclair Center Village, and in our master plan, that's shown in the pink. The master plan calls for a small-scale, dense area where single-family homes, apartments, and professional office buildings mixed to create an urban village at that location. So that gives you a little bit of the background. Sorry about that. In addition, the master plan emphasizes that this area, this is what it says for Montclair Center Village, just a further elaboration on that. It's an urban village where residents can comfortably commute by transit, by bicycle, or on foot. Residents of this area can access most of their daily needs either in Montclair Center or the Walnut Street Station area. Professional office development will primarily serve a local clientele. The plan calls for buildings up to 2.5 stories, 35 feet, and 65% building coverage. The zoning is shown on this next page. Obviously, the municipal building and the cornerstone house are shown in blue. Again, that's the public use zone, which permits public uses in buildings. The PNC drive-through bank branch is zoned OR3, which is garden apartment in an office building zone, which permits 1 and 2 family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, garden apartments, townhouses, office buildings, mixed-use buildings, and has a maximum height of 3 stories and 35 feet. As I mentioned earlier, again, another consideration is the state plan. The state plan, where you see the dark red, Montclair is located in the dark red area. Right around here. This is the metropolitan planning area, PA1. And the policy objectives for PA1 include promoting redevelopment by encouraging strategic land assembly and infill development, and encouraging redevelopment and at intensities that are sufficient to support transit. So this is just a little bit of background on the state plan. The state plan was first adopted in 1986. The most current version was adopted in 2001 and still remains in effect. It was intended to guide infrastructure, resources, and development into areas that are appropriate for that, otherwise known as smart growth, and identified areas that are appropriate for those types of investments, and that includes the PA1 area, which is the dark red, as well as designated centers, which are scattered throughout the state. So in preparation for this study, I collected studies that have been done of this building that have been done in the past, and evaluations that we had prepared by engineers and architects to identify problems and the necessary investments in this building to make it workable. The building is, this property, 205 Claremont Avenue, is a 34,000 square foot building. It was originally built as an office building back in 1969. It's a 3-story building and it has 113 parking spaces. The township acquired the building in 1980 and at that time converted it to a municipal building, basically the township hall. Sorry. So it has, the building is set back 23 feet from Claremont Avenue. Access to the parking lot is provided from a driveway on North Fullerton Avenue and a driveway on Claremont Avenue. The building currently houses the township's administrative offices, the clerk's office, personnel and human resources, the tax assessor, the tax collector, the finance department, the legal department, the Recreation and Cultural Affairs Department, the Planning Department, Code Enforcement, and the Health Department. There's approximately 76 employees here in the municipal building. So one of the issues with this property, and I think you all may be familiar with this, is the limitations created by our parking lot. Number one, for this use, we have an insufficient number of parking spaces. Typical municipal buildings of this size, when you look at parking requirements through established parking resources, indicate that between 136 and 170 parking spaces are required for a municipal building of this size, and we only provide 113. So that's number one concern, is the limited number of parking spaces for a municipal building. The other issue is the configuration and design of the parking lot. It's very tight. If you have a larger vehicle, it's very difficult to get those vehicles into these spaces. I went out and measured the parking spaces in our parking lots. Some of the parking spaces, actually all of them, are only 8.5 feet wide, and between 15.5 and 17.5 feet in length. So imagine 15.5 feet. That's very short for a parking space. Even 17.5 is short. Normally we want to see 19 feet. In addition, our aisles are too narrow. Our aisles vary between 20 feet and 22 feet in width. So you have not only the difficulty of the short parking spaces, but the narrow aisles creates difficulty maneuvering in and out of these parking spaces. And the parking spaces are only 8.5 feet wide. So that's an issue with navigating in the parking lot, particularly for larger vehicles. And it creates a safety concern as well. The other issue with the parking lot is sight distance as you drive out of the property, out of the parking lot on Claremont Avenue. It's a tight site, as you know. We have the generator located in the front, in the side yard near the road. And that, as you're approaching, creates a sight distance issue as you're exiting the site. So that's another issue with the design of the property, and creates a safety concern because you don't see pedestrians that are walking on the sidewalk. They're hidden behind the generator, as well as it creates a sight distance problem with vehicles coming and going along the road. Those reports that I referenced earlier included a needs assessment and programming study that was done in 2002. The objective of that study was to define the space requirements and operational characteristics of the departments and the facilities within the building. And the report concluded that the building is inefficient, overcrowded, and outdated, and that the outdated facilities and inadequate space do not meet the township's need as a municipal complex. In 2005, a report was prepared by Staunton Chow, an engineer, that provided an in-depth evaluation of the conditions of the municipal building. The report noted concerns about the roof, concluding that the roofing system has lived its expected service life and should be removed and repaired, including the roof membranes, the drains, leaders, cap, and penetration flashing. The open mortar joints on the exterior walls should be saw cut and repointed, and the bricks units replaced. He noted bowed areas in the exterior walls that needed further investigation. I think those bowed areas continue to be a problem. In fact, I took a tour of the building with the building custodian, and if you peel back some of the carpeting up on the third floor, you can see where the wall has separated from the floor plate. So again, a the structural problem with this, indicative of the structural problems with the building. The Staunton Chow report stated that the exterior canopies are structurally unstable. Interior issues include the lack of ADA accessible bathrooms on all 3 floors, the lack of proper closure devices on building doors, and the lack of a legal second means of egress from the 2nd floor conference room. Issues with the HVAC systems were noted, including the condition of the air-cooled condenser and chilled water pumps. The report recommended replacing the air handling unit, the fan coils, the valve boxes, the exhaust fans, the HVAC piping, the ductwork, the damper, and thermostat controls. The report recommended replacing the boiler, the hot water circulation pump, the HVAC piping and thermostat controls for the heating system. The report recommended replacing the hot water heater, the hot water piping, the cold water piping, and service. It noted that the gas piping was in fair condition, the sanitary and vent piping, plumbing fixtures, and drinking fountains were also in fair condition. All of those improvements, the cost for making those improvements in 2005 was $1.57 million, according to the report. Currently, and some of those improvements have been made over time, but certainly not all of the items that were addressed in that report. So what are the current conditions? Currently, we know the building continues to be plagued by a leaky roof and leaky pipes. Both the combination of the leaky roof and the leaky pipes have led to a problem with mold. In addition, the external walls are separating from the floor plate above the 2nd floor, leading to structural issues. The brick facade exterior is crumbling. The plumbing consists of galvanized pipes, which are rusting from the inside out, creating blockages and frequent flooding problems inside the building. So you can see from some of these photos here the problem with the molds. This is up on the 3rd floor, where the building is separated, the wall is separating from the floors. Problems with some of the windows created by, again, leaking. You can see these are some more close-ups of the conditions of some of our windows where we have water problems. So, evaluating this building in light of the criteria for redevelopment, I found that it meets criterion A, which, as we said before, let me reiterate what criteria A is. The generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any of such characteristics as to be conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. So my conclusion is the existing building is substandard, dilapidated, and obsolescent as noted by the poor condition of the roof, the exterior walls, the HVAC systems, and the interior plumbing. This dilapidated condition has led to continuous leaks and mold, which is conducive to unwholesome working conditions. It's obsolete for its current use as a municipal building, does not provide sufficient space to meet the full demand of a municipal building. That was the needs assessment that was done in 2002. Additional space is needed for senior services and the anticipated relocation of the police department. Then there's criterion D. Criterion D, to reiterate, is areas with buildings or improvements which, by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, faulty arrangement or design, or obsolete layout, or any combination of these or other factors are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the community. From criterion D, I found that the building is dilapidated and obsolete as noted by the poor condition of the roof, the exterior walls, the HVAC systems, and interior plumbing. This dilapidated condition has led to continuous leaks and mold, which is detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the employees and visitors to the building. The parking lot and driveways have a faulty arrangement and design, leading to difficulty for vehicles to safely maneuver in the parking lot and exit from the driveway. where you have some issues with site distance, and that is detrimental to the safety and welfare of employees and visitors to the property. Finally, it meets criterion H. The New Jersey State Plan encourages transit-oriented compact development and redevelopment within the metropolitan planning area. This site's location near the Walnut Street train station within the metropolitan planning area presents an ample opportunity for redevelopment. Bear in mind that for redevelopment, you only have to meet one criteria. So it's not like you have to meet multiple criteria. You only need to meet one for a property to be designated or properly designated as an area in need of redevelopment. The next property we evaluated is 57 Park Street. 57 Park Street is 19,190 square feet in size. It contains a one-story building of about 1,500 square feet. It was purposely built as a drive-through bank branch in 1961. It includes a parking lot for 11 vehicles that's located between the building and Claremont Avenue. There's 4 separate driveways that provide ingress and egress to the 2 roads that front this property. Property is vacant and was acquired by the township in 2021. So the issue here in terms of my evaluation is the consideration of that one-story building on a property that is 19,000, let me go back. The property is 19,000 square feet in size, and yet it has a very small one-story building, a purpose-built building for a drive-through bank. Those drive-through banks have become obsolete, especially with the onset of automatic teller machines, ATMs, and online banking. It's located or designed so it's surrounded by excessive pavement because you have 4 driveways. You've got 11 parking spaces between the building and the street. You know, we don't permit parking between the building and the street. We look to have it in the backyard. So for this very small building, there's excessive pavement that surrounds the one-story building. The amount of parking provided is twice the amount that's required for an office use. Again, it goes to the excessive pavement relative to the size of the building. The 4 curb cuts associated with the driveway limit on-street parking on Park Street and create additional hazards for pedestrians. The office building, which was designed from the 1960s, is a barrier to development that conforms to the policies of the office residential 3 zone and the policies that zone is designed to implement. It's one-story design, excessive coverage, parking location between the building and the street, and the excessive number of curb cuts is obsolescent and deleterious, and has a faulty design, and as a result is detrimental to the welfare of the community. This property also meets criterion H, which is that redevelopment of the property does advance the purposes of the state plan because it's in the planning PA1, planning area 1, and presents an opportunity for redevelopment. The final property that we looked at is the property at 68 North Fullerton Avenue. That property is 7,800 square feet in size, and it contains a historic house that was built in 1897. Currently, it's used, as Cornerstone House, which is an emergency shelter that was established in 1989 and is operated by the Salvation Army. A patio and playground area are provided in the rear yard. A board-on-board fence separates the property from the adjacent municipal complex. There's no parking provided on site, and there's no ADA access to the building. You have to walk up, 2 sets of stairs to actually get into the building, which is a design issue for this. Now, after evaluating this, I didn't think that this building met the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment. The local redevelopment housing law allows that redevelopment areas may include lands, buildings, or improvements which by themselves do not meet the criteria, but because of their location are necessary for the effective redevelopment of the area as a whole. In this instance, now let's see if I have go back to my map. Yeah. You can see how far back. This is the property with Cornerstone House. See how far back the property extends into the municipal lot. Here's the municipal building. It extends almost halfway, the lot itself, across the lot, and across the back of the building, well into the area where the municipal building is located. So there's an opportunity for better design of this area as a municipal complex. By incorporating that property, we can be a little bit more, it makes it easier to design the parking area and the building on this property because you would eliminate this cutout. And it provides an opportunity for this municipal complex to address some of the issues with that building, including ADA access, including an appropriate location for an outdoor play area for the residents of that building. So in that instance, let me go back to where I was. I felt that the current condition of the property is not detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, but because of its design, it provides an opportunity for a better layout, and that, in summary, the inclusion of this property is necessary for the effective redevelopment of this area, just because of its configuration of the lot. So my recommendation to you, based on the analysis that we did, is that this property, these three properties do meet the criteria, and should be designated as an area in need of redevelopment. And I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have.
One question from me is with respect to the house that's on the corner. Why wasn't that included for the same reason that the Salvation Army space that's being, why wasn't that included?
The township doesn't own that property.
What does that have to do with it being the criteria that you just set forth for including the South Fullerton property, other South Fullerton? I'm sorry, North Fullerton property.
Let me go back to the map. All right, John, I think you're talking about this property right here.
Mm-hmm. It's not in need, but it's adjacent, and wouldn't it be, you're talking about developing a municipal complex, wouldn't it be for the same reason that the house next to it should be included? Doesn't that equally apply to that property?
The council did not ask us to look into that property, so I gather that it was not part of their planning to include that into in the future complex. I think they included the one at on North Fullerton Avenue because they own that property. That is our property. And since we do own it, there's an opportunity without the burden of acquisition to incorporate it into the design.
Well, it doesn't have to be, I understand that, and that's fine. But I would just say that it doesn't mean that we have to acquire that property now. It would be in the zone, and it doesn't mean that it has to go anyplace. It's just that for the future,
Right.
when something does happen, wouldn't it make more sense for it to be a part of the municipal parcel? That's. I just merely asked the question. I understand your answer if the council does not feel at this point in time, that they want to do that. But it just seemed to me a little, I guess, odd in light of some of the other steps that we've taken for other properties that we leave that little corner out. Other questions?
Yeah, so if the township owns the 3 lots, why is the zone necessary? I mean, couldn't the township just build what they want to build?
I think the township is here, and they can answer that question,
Okay.
but my understanding is they want to use the flexibility of the redevelopment process to build and design a future municipal complex.
Oh, you know, if they're here, if they could tell us what the plan is, in other words, my understanding from your presentation is that this building is going to be demolished, and then the employees will be relocated someplace else and then come back to the site later? Or it'd be great to hear what the plan is.
At this point, I don't know what the plan is. This is the first step.
Representatives were here to.
They are here. They can
Okay, yeah,
answer.
that'd be great.
Well, I have some other questions as well, maybe?
Okay.
Oh, whatever. Okay. So I didn't note in your presentation, what year was this building built?
69.
1960 or 61. These two buildings were built about in the very early 60s.
The bank and
The
this?
bank and this
Okay.
building.
You said 69.
69?
69?
Okay,
Okay.
then that's probably correct. That's what's in my report, then
Okay.
that's correct.
If the Cornerstone House is historic,
Yes.
if this was an area in need of redevelopment, would we be able to demolish that building?
You would need to go to the HPC, because, yeah, if it was I believe it was a surveyed property. And the way our regulations are written right now, a surveyed property would require HPC approval before it's demolished.
Okay, okay. And the same vein as Chair Wynn's question of the other house where the Rosacea Society is, what about the property where the Red Cross building is? It was for sale up until recently, and I don't know what there's a sign there that says apartments coming soon. Is that building staying are they going to build the apartments there?
I don't.
Because that's a big chunk of
Yeah.
property right next to the
That-
bank.
That's this property here.
Yes. So,
We were not asked to include that property in the redevelopment study. That property did receive site plan approval from the Board of Adjustment for, I
Okay.
believe, 11 apartments and office space on the first floor in the back.
okay, okay. What year was the generator installed in the gray?
I think it was 5 years ago,
5
6 years ago.
And has there, so this building in this area was a focus of yours to look at. Have you looked at other township buildings, like the Public Works building on Fullerton, that's probably seen a better day? I've been in it a couple of times, and it needs repairs. And Clary Anderson Arena.
I have not done an evaluation of either of those properties.
Okay, I was just curious. And I think those were all my questions. Oh, well, maybe the town can answer this. Was there a cost comparison done for a total possible rebuild of this building versus a renovation of some of the things that you showed us? Which maybe we should leave now, according to some of those those unsavory pictures. But you know, I mean, an old house, you don't necessarily tear it down and build a new house, you renovate. So at some point, I would think there would be a cost comparison as opposed to tearing everything down, rebuild.
We don't have a plan yet.
Okay.
In fact, I believe we issued an RFP
We did.
to retain an architect and a planner and an engineer to work with us on this very question. So again, this is just the first step, and we
Okay.
don't know
Okay.
exactly what's gonna happen.
Right.
At least I don't, unless somebody else from the,
Okay.
it's not been brought to my attention.
Okay.
And-
Nor mine, right.
Am I correct in thinking that if we do designate the property as an area in need of redevelopment, it doesn't mean that we have to tear down the building? It could be a combination of expansion and renovation, and that would be on the table also, right?
Absolutely. What this does is this is the first step before you can do the redevelopment plan. And as you know, that's where the magic happens when you do the redevelopment plan. You do the design analysis, you know, you come up, that's where all the work, real work is done, is in the redevelopment plan. And it does give you a lot more,
Flexibility.
it's a comprehensive approach, because not only do you have the aspect of zoning, but you have design standards in there. You have a whole host of details in a plan for a specific piece of property that you normally don't have. And obviously, there's a lot of, from the financial side, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of opportunities to finance redevelopment projects. I think that's speaking on behalf of the township than non-redevelopment projects, so.
Janice, what, with existing zoning, what's the height allowed? Does height play into it, so that, you know, if this is 3 stories, you can go 4 or 5, or is that, I would think that would be, you know, looking at the density, what's the height that is allowed in existing zoning? Would you happen to know that?
Well, there is no height limit for the P zone.
Oh, so the town could do what they wanted there.
But for the
Yeah.
OR3,
Yeah.
it's 35 feet.
Could they get the house, oh, so the house is in the P, and then the bank building could be put in P, and you'd have no density issue theoretically?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, some comments on how the financing would, I mean, that's sort of interesting, how that would, why the redevelopment plan would be advantageous from, but it sounds like from a zoning standpoint, the township could rezone and from a density standpoint, do what they wanted. So it's not as if you need this redevelopment plan to change the zoning. Does that sound right? All right, thanks.
You don't need it to, because the township owns the property, we have a lot more flexibility. But again, I think that there's an intrinsic value in the redevelopment approach, not only because you come together with the plan and you come together with the design details and the pictures, which
Okay.
is a public process.
Okay, well,
And
outside of
also,
zoning.
Tony,
yeah.
if I can just
Sure,
add
yeah, no
too, I
problem.
think part of the process here is that we're being asked by the township council as to whether or not these properties qualify for this. And that's a different question than whether it's a good idea or how it would be done. This is a matter of whether or not it meets the statutory criteria, and for a study to be done. And, you know, as the township is, the council is is the entity that is charged with making those kinds of requests of the planning board. The fact that they own the property, you know, just makes it easier for them to ask us.
Yeah, I agree completely, but I think it's also valuable to know the why of things, just kind of the way I'm wired. So I guess that the other aspects of the advantages of a redevelopment plan would be good to know. Not, you know, despite that, we're here to look at the criteria and so forth. So if density and height aren't an advantage, what are the other advantages?
I think it's,
There are other advantages. I was just curious as to what they are.
I think in addition to what I said about the benefits of the redevelopment process, it also opens up a broader range of financing alternatives that you would not normally have.
I was curious if the conditions under which you qualify an area in need of redevelopment, so for example, H, having to do with smart growth, could that obligate you to act in any certain way on the redevelopment plan? So being in a transit zone requires some certain action, or are those just, these are the basis?
It doesn't require any certain action, no.
So the council passed this resolution on June 21st, right?
Is that I have it,
That's the date of the resolution.
yes, it is June 21st.
And then your report is dated July 11th,
Yes.
and it's August 8th. Did we notify the neighbors?
Neighbors are not notified, property owners are notified, the papers, the notice was in the paper on July 21st and July 28th for the Star Ledger and the Montclair Times, and the notice was sent to the clerk. And as I said, I did notify our tenant, so that they wouldn't be surprised.
And just because I'm still relatively new, is the 6-week time frame from the council adopting a resolution to a public hearing normal?
I was, not necessarily, it depends. In this instance, I was able to dedicate the time to do this in comparison to when we did the Label Street study, when I didn't have an assistant, and both boards were really busy. So that's why I say it depends. When this, I knew that they were interested in doing this, so I was able to compile the information. I had a lot of it in my office, and I had the time to do the study.
Sounds exactly right. And is August typically a time that we would have a public hearing on an area in need of redevelopment study?
We would, we meet twice a month, 12 months of the year. We don't not meet, we have never not met just because of August.
No, but I'm just asking, in your time as the planner, have there been area in need of redevelopment hearings in the month of August?
I don't know. I know we've had public hearings on master plans or under the reexamination report in August. I have to double check.
And are you aware of any municipal buildings anywhere in New Jersey that have been adopted as areas in need of redevelopment? Okay.
I have not personally been involved in any, but other municipalities have.
Janice, the statutory time frame for notice had been complied with, though.
Yes, it has. You and I worked on that.
You and I worked on that.
I just had one observation on the fall. Like, I'm pretty concerned about the falling brick, or the brick that's coming off the exterior wall. That's been a major issue in New York City with people getting injured. I would recommend either looking at that seriously, having a structural engineer take a look and see if any of those bricks are loose and coming off, or simply closing the parking or whatever's underneath that.
Well, you can see it on the west side of the building where the guardrail is. That's where some of it has fallen.
I mean, I see it from the photos here and from your presentation tonight. That gives me quite a bit of concern.
Yeah.
Since that's a main access into the parking lot.
Right. And isn't that where the pedestrian walkway is?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, so if this should go forward, we're talking probably 2-3 years, perhaps, maybe? So it's a long process if this building was to be redone. So
There would be a lot of steps to the process.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know
we
how
don't
long
know.
it would take, but, again, it's a very public process.
Right. No, but in the meantime, have steps being taken to make sure this building is safe, like mold and falling bricks? And
I do know in my conversations with the building custodian that he cleans the mold, it comes back. So I don't know about, what they're doing about the brick.
Right.
I can't answer that.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, the police building is in no better and probably worse shape.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Yeah, that was designated an area in need of redevelopment a couple of years ago, so
Yeah. but-
we're all familiar with that one.
Yes, but nothing's happened.
Any other questions, or can we hear from the members of or participants from the town and the Salvation Army, hear what they have to say?
Good evening, everyone.
I think because we're conducting a
that's not
public
public.
hearing, I think we're going to swear everybody in. Sir, do you
But that-
solemn?
Or,
We're gonna plug you.
yeah, that microphone's not plugged
Oh,
in.
you have this sonorous voice that just carries without the microphone, right?
Does that work, Janice?
Is it turned on?
It
Is the
sounds
green-
green.
Is the green lights on, then you're good.
All right, there we are. Good.
All right, I'm going to try that one more time.
All right.
I may as well do all of you at once. This is 3 for the price of 1. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please individually state your names for the record?
Timothy Stafford.
Brian Scantlebury.
Bob Beneke.
Thank you.
Yes. You want me to go?
Please.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Counselor, how are you? Janice did a great job outlining the conditions of the 2 primary properties and, of course, the other property, which is the Salvation Army building, if you will, or facility. My name is Bob Beneke again. I am the financial consultant to the town. I've been engaged by the town for about 8 years now. And, you know, if you'd like, I could go through my resume. Suffice it to say that tonight I'm going to a city council meeting to testify on redevelopment. And as soon as this meeting's over, it's just texting them. And I appear before planning boards, city councils, county commissioners, et cetera, basically 2 times a week, 3 or 4 times a month at least. Tonight, we represent the township. The township is looking at and exploring combining the PNC property, as we call it, with the municipal complex here. As Janice very aptly again pointed out, this building is deteriorating. Sometimes it doesn't look it or feel like it, but it is deteriorating. And of course, the PNC building speaks for itself as well in terms of the conditions. It's approximately slightly less than 2 acres. And the governing body asked you to look at the Salvation Army, if you will, facility or house separately because there could be some advantages to tweaking the yards or the grounds. But just let me be clear, no one is suggesting that use change whatsoever or those tenants be any way disturbed. If anything, we would improve the condition of that particular structure. Our plan is to attempt to take various tax increment financing under what's called subchapter 8, specifically subchapter 8H of the local redevelopment and housing law, and apply various tax increments to pay for any improvement to this building and any combination of the properties between the PNC building and here. That's subchapter 8, it's NJSA 4812A 8A through, I guess it's H now. That actually allows us to do various things with subdivisions, with contracting, with easements, et cetera, that would otherwise not be available in our toolkit. We're not looking per se to rezone. As a matter of fact, 20% of the redevelopment plans that we work on, rezoning isn't even in the cards because of either adequate buffers and bulk standards, or because we want to have a redevelopment plan or redevelopment designation, as the case may be, cemented, and then we move forward 5, 6, 10 years later with a redevelopment plan. The plan here is to attempt to refurbish this building or replace it, depending how the costs come out. While this building does have over 30,000 square feet of space, it does have a basement that Janice didn't note, and the basement is in deteriorating condition as well. So again, the criteria does fit or meet the building, and the building does meet or fit the criteria, and that's what we're here for tonight. In terms of the flexibility that the local redevelopment and housing law provides us, again, we can take a tax increment, also sometimes referred to in New Jersey as pilots, and then specifically earmark them for the improvement to this building as an urban renewal entity or as a public entity that would be accepting those monies, and then we would be able to bypass the taxpayer, if you will, directly for paying some of that freight on refurbishing or rebuilding this building. We're also going to look at the potential, just the potential of potentially having the police department located in this particular property as well. Clary Anderson Arena we have looked at, and that's a matter for another day, obviously, but that's important to us. It's beautiful property, obviously. We've taken pictures, we've spoken to Janice and of course the staff members about it as well. And that property is ripe for refurbishment as well. There's no question about it. It's great property. It's the more you spend time on that property, the more excited you get about the potential for that property. In terms of the Red Cross building was up for sale. The final sales price was double, maybe triple what we thought we would be able to pay for it. So it basically got costed out of the equation. But we are looking at other alternatives as well throughout the town. So here, we are asking the planning board to accept Janice's conclusions and accept her recommendation and have the area in need of redevelopment designation satisfied and applied for and approved by the planning board, so it can be sent back to the council, and then we can go into the next step. Tim Stafford is the township manager, CEO, he's also an attorney, and of course Brian Scantlebury is the deputy manager, and he runs a lot of programs from the tenant relations board to all sorts of other programs in town, including various property programs. So we're all part of the team. Janice is part of the team, finance personnel part of the team, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you do have.
Can you go
This
back?
act-
Go ahead, Tony.
No, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, sure.
Can you go back to what you said about pilots and just kind of go a little more slowly
Well,
and explain what the impact is on the Montclair taxpayer if we do or don't?
Well, I don't know if I really want to go into too deep of the woods, because that's not the issue here tonight, right? As the chairman noted at the opening, the issue is to apply the criteria to the property, and that's a statutory charge that you have under NJSA
Mr. Beneke,
4812A5.
you waived, you can't object to that question.
Oh, sure I
after
can.
After you put on the record that you're doing this because of
I
something
didn't
you
say
can
we
do
would
with
be
pilots.
putting, no, I said to
Yeah,
take advantage
Bob
of
and
potentially.
Jeff, I've got a specific question
Sure, go
related
ahead.
to,
Sure.
you mentioned tax increment, but the public entity is non-taxable. So would there be a taxable entity acquiring the property,
No.
and then the township would become a tenant, or where, how does the tax,
You would
because you
take-
mentioned specifically
Sure,
TIFs.
you would take a tax increment from another section of town, a private investor or a private investment, whatever that project may be, that would then have a tax increment or a payment in lieu of tax, and then you can earmark that money for this
I
building.
get it. So then the area of need of redevelopment allows the acceptance of that?
No, the redevelopment plan does.
Oh, okay, well, the redevelopment, right, you need this first. I get it now. That was very helpful. Like, now, that's some of the why that
So,
really helps.
so let me back up. I don't mean to be argumentative. Let me back up for a second. We don't have a plan yet. To get through the planning stage, as Janice noted, we need to have a designation of the area in need of redevelopment so we can take advantage of that toolkit. If we don't have the ability to take advantage of that toolkit, we're foreclosed. Here in Montclair, in most of eastern Essex County, Hudson County, most of southern Bergen County, payment in lieu of taxes and tax increments are used to support community benefits. One of the community benefits would be this property. One of the community benefits might be Clary Anderson. One of the community benefits may be the improvement to some drainage or waterway or stream problems that we have in town. So we can take that money and we can isolate it or allocate it to those specific properties. And that's what this project actually hopefully will do, is that we can build a new building or refurbish it, whatever the cost quotient is, and come out in a better place. That's what we hope for.
So if you didn't have the redevelopment plan, you couldn't get the TIF money?
You couldn't get the TIF money here, no, that's correct. Not directly. You get it into your general budget, and then over time, you don't know left hand, right hand, how those dots would be connected.
Any other questions? Doesn't look like there are any other questions.
Come on, answer something, huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I thought you had said at the top that there was somebody might be here from the Salvation Army.
She is. We have a representative.
But it doesn't look like you have anything to tell us.
Well, I don't have any answers, I'm just here to listen.
Okay.
Right.
Well, if there's something that you wanted to tell us, we just want to make sure you had the opportunity. So. All right. So it's up to us now to make a determination as to whether we feel that the property qualifies under the statutory criteria as Janice has outlined it. You know, my reaction to it is that because the criteria is so broad, that it qualifies. I mean, it's buildings of this age and of this use that have been so poorly maintained, you know, can't help but qualify, basically. Other thoughts?
Basically, my understanding of our role was is that.
Carol, can you turn your microphone on?
I'm sorry.
Oh, and let the record reflect too that Carol did arrive at approximately 7:45.
Okay. My understanding of our role is that it's very limited, that we're only asked to say, does it qualify, not to help design it, or to comment about the design of it. So that's why it doesn't seem as though there's a lot generated for us to do on it, other than to say that I agree with you that certainly the criteria is broad enough that we would seem to qualify, that the area would seem to qualify.
Except we just had one of these where we said that it didn't meet any of the criteria because people came and said, we're here, we're doing fine, and we don't want to do it. Now here we've got township employees that are coming in and saying our building is dilapidated.
I think this differs from the other in the fact that the people who were there said it was not dilapidated. They showed us evidence that it was accessible and not falling apart, and that it was in fact an ideal for the many of the people that were located there. So they disagreed that it was that it qualified, and we agreed with their presentation. So that's what made it different. Tonight we have people who are confirming that they also feel that it needs to be done. So that's the difference between this and the last hearing.
I have a, if you don't mind, I have a Salvation Army question. What would happen to the Cornerstone house, to the purpose that it serves? Would the town have an obligation to find them another space? I've toured the building and the house, and it serves a very important purpose. And it's filled, from what I've gathered, you know, there are people that use the services there. Would it be the town's obligation to find them another space? Or does the Salvation Army have something else in mind?
I think at this point, the intent is not, as I understand, is not to tear down that building. The intent is just to come up and to integrate it into the redesign of the municipal complex, because there's an opportunity for a win-win situation with access and parking. So the township's in the driver's seat, you know.
In addition to that, I don't know what the terms of the lease are, but the town has to honor the existing lease.
Yes.
And the regulations that govern, you know, the type of commercial lease that's there.
Okay,
So-
okay. So in other words, we might have a shelter within
Well,
this, you know, if that might be studied?
it'll be considered as part of the plan. It may stay in its current location, but the configuration on the edges of the property may change.
Okay.
Again, remember, they have a real problem with ADA access. So we might be able to provide access to them from our parking lot or our drive in exchange for a better layout for our property. So,
Gentlemen, what is the length of the lease for Salvation Army?
I think Michelle knows. This is Michelle Kraus. Michelle, you want to come up so that we can get you on the recording?
Yeah, so that people listening to can hear you.
And if you wouldn't mind, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your name and business affiliation for the record?
Michelle Peruzzi, I'm the business manager of the Salvation Army.
Thank you.
So we currently have a lease, and it is up for renewal in 2023.
Do you know what the term of this lease is, the current lease? Was it a 5, 10, 15?
5-year.
5-year term? With an option or no?
To renew, yes. And been in this arrangement since the 1980s.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Look, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just troubled by the whole thing. I think this process was truncated. I think that we're doing this in an awful hurry. And the reasoning, I mean, yes, the criteria are very broad, but, I'm troubled. Maybe I'm troubled for the wrong reasons. Maybe I shouldn't be troubled, but I am rather significantly troubled.
If you remove the dilapidation and the obsolescence of the building, let's say that the township actually put a new roof on the building. They didn't let it become dilapidated. Are there other criteria that would give it a yes? Or is it just sort of like this? It's this odd thing. You don't take care of your building, you get a redevelopment plan, you win.
Well,
So it's sort of, it's just an odd thing that,
Well, I think too, you're adding, those aren't the only two
Yeah,
criteria that
so-
Janet
And
mentioned.
I think there's also the faulty arrangement and design.
Right, both in
too.
the parking lot and internally.
okay, so.
If you
so-
go upstairs and you look in the offices, and I can just speak from
Okay.
personal
So it's not
experience
just the
in the planning
condition.
office, if you look at it, the way that things are, they hardly have room for files up
Right.
there, and the layout is so cut up.
But there are 76 employees, and 76 employees in 36,000 feet. Now, albeit there's public space here too. That's one person for 450, square feet, which is rather generous from the standpoint of it being an office building. So I would say that it could be reconfigured internally to adapt to 76 employees, but the addition of the police department throws that out the window, I guess, because then now you're talking, far more.
Right.
Okay. I'm just, I guess,
And then
the
looking to
interior.
add, and then also looking to add the other property. If you want to put expansion or complete tear down and rebuild on the table, this gives them the flexibility to do that and to reconfigure the building if that's the more cost-effective way, more efficiently.
By the way, one of the reasons I'm troubled is because the township manager and the township planner have gone on record tonight and talked about health hazards in the building, about physical safety hazards in the building, in a way that if I were advising the township as their lawyer, I wouldn't have let him do it. So I think this whole thing is not, I'm troubled.
I mean, I'm troubled with the safety hazards and the health hazards. Like, that's
Don't-
actually
don't
my
strike
big
me
concern
from the
with
chair,
this.
sir. If you want to give an answer to that, you can come back up here and give an answer on the record.
Okay, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be troubled by it, because the township has an interest in making sure that this building is done correctly and planned correctly. We have ingress and egress problems. We have other problems with this building. We acquired property at PNC Bank to do this project right. As Janice noted, we're getting, as Ms. Talley noted, we're getting a architect to help us plan this out correctly and do it the right way. And that's what we're here for tonight. We're not here to debate going forward legal arguments about what your client would or wouldn't do. Simply, we have 8 criteria and 2 properties, maybe 3 with the Salvation Army. Do those 8 criteria fit the building? Does the building fit the 8 criteria? That's before you. That's the only matter.
What does that have to do with my point about whether the building is dilapidated and to what extent?
Because that's one of the criteria. One of the criteria is the condition of the building. Is it dilapidated? Is it obsolete? Does it satisfy the
And
criteria?
so your advice was that they should come in here and talk about mold and talk about hazards and talk about
That's
things
not my
like.
advice. That's in Janice's report. If that's the condition she found in the building, that's the condition she found in the building.
So when you said I shouldn't be troubled by those.
The redevelopment plan.
That's not what I said, sir.
Okay, I misheard you then. You shouldn't be troubled to vote, not to vote yes. That's my point. By voting yes, we move this nice project along, hopefully the right way, either refurbishment, total refurbishment the right way, or rebuild, one way or the other.
One of the things that I was wondering about, and this is my inexperience in trying to apply these criteria to a building which is fully occupied. Because I've seen many buildings that meet the criteria that are vacant. That I know because people can't use them because they're substandard, they're unsafe, they're unsanitary and dilapidated. What I'm kind of puzzled with is that this is our town hall that we currently use right now, and we're basically saying that it's unsafe, it's unsanitary, dilapidated, obsolete. You know, I think I'm, at least from a thought perspective, so, and I don't know where, I mean, how dilapidated does it need to be? I mean, obviously, if there's a problem with the window lintel and it's bent, it could fall, you know, the bricks could fall on someone. So it seems like,
I
and
think,
the
Tony,
report
to
says
answer that
that
question.
the township knew that these things, that the roof leaked 20 years ago. I mean, has there been a new roof put on the building?
I believe that there's been, I don't know if there's a whole new roof, but there have been the patchwork improvements, and the problems still remain. So.
Okay, I guess-
And then, Tony, my point initially at the outset of this about the criteria being very broad, the criteria says or any element of these. So it doesn't mean that
Yeah,
the whole
so you
building
can-
has to be dilapidated. It has to be that there are issues of dilapidation in the building,
Yeah.
basically qualifies it for it.
And it
That's-
doesn't say anything about it being vacant or unoccupied.
Right.
No, no.
In
I
fact,
think-
that's
it's
a
a
different,
really
that's a
low
different
bar.
No,
criteria.
I was just trying to relate it to the experience that I've had in areas that have been declared. They're really uses that are no longer, like this industrial property, which was built as a mill building, which is not gonna be a mill building, or again, I was just trying to get a measure of how broad it can be, but it sounds like if there's a trivial amount of truth, or, you know, some very small amount of truth to it, it can be. Arthur, would you say that? It doesn't matter how little, if there's a leaky roof that could be fixed, if there's a window lintel that could be fixed, if there's mold that could be gotten rid of, does that still make it this building that needs to be redeveloped? I mean, I guess I'm just struggling with where
Yeah,
that.
so I think the board needs to look at the criteria and Janice's report in an objective way. Determining whether or not things can be refurbished, rebuilt, whatever, that's really not within the purview here. Ms. Willis expressed it very aptly by saying that your job is really to determine whether or not the presentation and the evidence that's presented to you meets the criteria of the statute. And
I
that's
do want
really.
to respond. I've been thinking about Ms. Willis's point, which was an excellent one, except for one thing that's kind of occurred to me, is that, you know, here's a situation where there is one landlord, being the township. The township CEO is here, he's made the decision that this ought to happen, and one of his employees gave a presentation saying this ought to happen. So there's nobody who logically could come and say, and give an opposing point of view, even if there was one, because it's all one big happy family that's decided that this is what ought to happen. And so I think that it definitely feeds into what Arthur said, which is we do need to look at this objectively. But part of that means kind of taking a look at this and saying, you know, okay, but.
I think if you had a situation where there's mold in the vents, and that was it, that would be a little problematic, okay? I think technically it would still hit the any, but, you know, as to whether or not it's a de minimis amount or not, we're not dealing with that here according to what Janice is saying, and what Janice has presented are not things that she's created, but they're objectively issues that exist in the building with respect to not only dilapidation, but in the layout of the building and how the space is used. And so it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of, and I think it adds up to enough to meet this really low bar.
Yeah. But, you know, the driving factor of being able to receive financing, if you have it, is a lot of pressure. You know, you think about, well, if you don't do the area need, if you don't have a redevelopment plan, then you may not be able to get this TIF money. And so that's sort of like additional
But so
Pressure.
what?
Well, that's,
I mean-
well, that's,
Well,
and that's,
I mean, but it's there, right? And that's, otherwise, I don't think that the redevelopment area would be sought. I think if there was no other factors, zoning is not an issue. It seems like this,
I think you're right, Tony, in terms
So
of
it's really a
motivation.
driving
Because
force.
this is public, it's a public, they can do whatever,
Yeah.
they can put whatever they want. But clearly, they want to, and they've said, they want to take advantage of what the redevelopment toolkit will allow them to take advantage. So, And, I mean, we can't, the statute allows that, so we can't say, oh, that's a bad motivation. It's permissible. It's part of what the statute was designed for, so.
One thing stood out in the presentation when you mentioned that the wall was recessing away from the floor. Was that the exterior wall?
Yes, it was, well, no, it was on the inside. If you pull the carpeting away,
Right.
you can see where the wall is separating from the
But the
floor.
walls at the exterior wall
Yes.
is recessing. Was a structural engineer involved in looking at that? Because that's a
That,
serious.
I don't know. It was
Yeah.
identified in the report, and it was, we found where the
Because if a wa-
condition
right.
exists.
Yeah, no, I'm saying if structurally for exterior wall, I forget what the bolts are called, but if the wall is bowing on the outside.
Right.
That's a serious structural, so that would require a professional a professional structural engineer to come and look at and assess themselves. But if we don't have an assessment from a structural engineer, I don't know how we can make, I don't know how I personally can make.
Well, the condition was identified originally by the engineer, Staunton Chow, back in 2005. I then, when I was doing my analysis, it was pointed out to me where it still exists. So, moving ahead, after we do the designation, do this next step, then we'll have a professional engineer, a structural engineer come in and evaluate, the options of whether or not this building can be adaptively reused or a new building. At that point, we
So
would
to
have,
have a structural engineer come and look at
but
it.
that's separate from
Well, no,
the-
that's what I'm saying, no,
this step.
no, I know it's separate, but to move forward for a structural engineer to actually look at that aspect
I
would
was certainly-
mean the next step would be for the approval.
Right, I anticipate that would be the next step.
I think that should happen regardless of whatever we do tonight, to be honest with you. I mean, look, I've been on sites that have had wall collapses. It's a really bad and difficult and disruptive thing, let alone safety for people who might be nearby.
Not
I
a good
think,
look for the township
right.
headquarters to be.
I think
collapsing.
regardless of whatever happens tonight, that should be something that's done quickly.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Stafford was going to come up and put on the record that he didn't direct Ms. Talley to do anything other than apply her professional judgment. I think to be fair, we ought to let him put that on the record.
That's true, and I'll rely on the judgment. However, through
We-
you, Mr.
come up-
Chairman.
come up-
we
Come on
can't
up
hear
to
you.
the microphone,
Yeah.
please.
That is true, and I appreciate the gentleman's comments. I would only also say that I thought I heard you say something along the lines of, you're here tonight because I put something before you. That's not accurate. The governing body's resolution is what's before you, or is what causes you to be here. So in the interest of accuracy, I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
Asking, there seems to be quite a bit of concern about safety issues of the building. You are the township administrator. Can you give the board some idea about what steps the township is going to be taking with regard to these safety issues?
Periodically, the township has all safety issues in connection with the building reviewed by whatever engineers need to review them. The floor plates will be examined by a structural engineer forthwith.
What about the side of the building, the west side of the building?
That's been looked at since I got here.
Right, but the pictures suggest to me, and I'm a layman, but the pictures suggest to me that these bricks that are on the side of the building are, I don't want to use the term imminent, but sure looks pretty bad to me.
And that's why we have engineers look at them periodically.
Looking at them doesn't result, I'm not going to do that.
Thank you.
All right, well, We need a motion, Janice?
Yes.
And I would propose that, a motion that we, the board conclude that the properties in question meet the minimum criteria for designation as areas in need of redevelopment.
Okay.
I'm still, I'm not there yet. I can't, I don't know how I'm gonna vote on this, and I do not like to abstain. It says the generality of buildings are substandard, not if there's one thing, so.
Well, read the whole thing, though.
But it says the generality of buildings
What are you,
substandard.
which are,
And we're talking about.
where are you reading, Tony?
Hey, Bill Pace, I mean, it's a little, look, I tried to get there on the language, and I can't get there. I mean, the language is the language, and the chairman is exactly right. It's awfully broad, and so what the council has done here is they've
Well-
sliced this in a particular way.
But see, that's the language that I'm looking at too, and it says the generality of the buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any such characteristics.
Right.
That's like such a catch-all, any such characteristics, well, yeah. Are there some substandard issues in here? Clearly. Are there some unsafe issues? Clearly.
Yeah,
I mean, it says any.
The generality of the building means that the whole building, it's not.
But it's or, but the connecting word, Tony, is or, so you don't,
No, there's an R, there's a verb after generality of buildings, are substandard, or possess, or the generality of the buildings possess any of such characteristics. Not, you can't.
or the generality of the buildings is one building.
Right, that's the point, is that the council
It's
has
just
done
one
this in a
building.
particular way, so we're looking at the conditions of the building. I mean, look, part of what I've just kind of been wrestling with is, I don't particularly want to go on record saying that I'm aware of the building being unsafe, and so that's why I'm voting for this resolution. And so, I think that there's.
I think that's a risk that really is the township's problem. Because they're putting it on the record very clearly. So now they need to do something about it, or else if something happens, they're gonna be in a really bad place. But I mean, but this is what they want, and surely they must realize that, So
I think,
I mean, that's, and we're not being asked to consider that. We're not being asked to consider whether the township is gonna do something or exposes the township to more liability, which, by the way, it does. As, in my professional opinion. But, unless they've taken some steps, unless they can explain it to mitigate it. But, I looked at that as separate. That's not what we're here for this evening.
I think I'm seeing the word obsolescent in both A and D, and I'm finding also in D faulty arrangement or design, which I feel the township has made the case that even if it wasn't unsafe, the faulty design of the parking facility, the faulty design of the bank building, and the lack of, among other things, a second-story staircase kind of lead to that obsolescence qualification, regardless of the standard. And as the chairman was saying, it's a very broad definition. The deck was stacked in the legislation itself to give a lot of flexibility on these. I'm curious, Ms. Talley, in your professional opinion, criteria H seems the broadest of the broad. Does its mere existence near a train station essentially mean it's eligible for redevelopment, kind of inherently?
No, H is the one criteria that if that's the only one that is met, then it would be questionable, because there's a lot of properties that,
Including the one we didn't do.
yeah.
Right.
So-
Including most of the town.
Right.
6 train stations.
So
Really
that's why
hard to
I
avoid
didn't
that.
spend a lot of time talking about criterion H.
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
So in A refers to the generality of buildings, and D refers to areas with buildings or improvements. So if we accept D, we're saying that the area in general is dilapidated, that house, the bank building. I don't think that D applies, in my opinion. It's the area.
Do you think A applies?
No, not with spec, again, this is my opinion. I think that A speaks about the generality of this building with all this other stuff. That's the subject of the sentence. So I feel that A does not apply, based on my literal reading of that. If it said, if the building has substandard qualities, unsafe or sanitary, but it's about the generality of the whole building, and what I'm hearing is that it needs a new roof, it needs some other stuff worked on, but the generality of this building is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily fall in this condition, because one of the options, well, I shouldn't go forward in terms of the plan, I should just keep it right there. So I'm comfortable with that it doesn't meet based on that, and thanks for clarifying that H doesn't exist on its own.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second, Mr. Neiman. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Brodock.
Yes.
Mr. Ianwali.
No?
Mr. Ortiz.
Yes.
Mr. Pierre.
No.
Counselor Schlager.
Yes.
Ms. Willis.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
No.
And then Mr. Neiman
Yes.
and Mr. Nguyen, Chair Nguyen.
Yes.
We have 6 yeses and 3 noes.
Motion is carried. All right, gentlemen.
I didn't even.
We have another matter to deal with. Good evening. And I guess we make a motion rather, to go into executive session.
Second.
Guess I should close the doors, right?
Yeah,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, we have payment of bills, but we're going to address the, whether or not we're going to have a meeting later in the month.
I don't think there were any, I don't think I submitted any bills.
No
so-
bills.
No bills, so we're good.
I must be thinking of the last meeting then.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's on the agenda, but we didn't have any to approve, so,
Yeah.
or review.
From my firm, that's shocking.
I got your bills today.
So now you're gonna have to wait a
Question
month,
answered.
it sounds like.
September, you'll have to wait till September 12th. Right.
So, and I have no items for the August 22nd meeting, so I would like to cancel the meeting.
Okay,
Okay?
let's do it.
Good, okay. And then our next meeting would be September 12th.
All right.
Okay.
what you're having on?
September 12th?
Yeah.
I don't have anything right now.
I'm just asking, because has Summit made any noise about coming back?
I haven't heard back from them.
Good.
And we have one application, but they won't be ready to proceed until October. Oh, we do have a new cannabis application. That might be ready for September. I have to review that one.
Another cannabis location?
A cannabis conditional use permit.
In town? Really? Where?
I don't think we should talk about it yet
Oh, okay.
until,
Is it an application?
they applied for a conditional use permit, just like Ascend did. So, it's on Bloomfield Avenue. So I will try and get that in September, at the September 12th
Three.
meeting.
When you approve.
That's right, 3. But their applications are due the end of the
Oh,
month.
you know, it might not be the same. I have to figure out which, well, the council hasn't acted on that yet.
On the Ascend?
Oh, I don't know what the council did on this Ascend.
So, no,
You feel no fear about being sued by Ascend, huh?
so no meeting on August 22nd,
No
that's.
comment on that.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we have a couple of applications, and I'm not sure what the dates for those applications are yet.
Okay,
All right.
very good.
Okay?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
See you after Labor Day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Yes,